The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the last 8 teams standing. What can we take away from the win over the Eagles, and where can they take advantage of the Lions? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We cover your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I do it for SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Evan does it for 10 Tampa Bay and 10TampaBay.com. And you can find this show 5 days a week on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, we want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, the inside scoop, exclusive content delivered directly to your phone, including text messages with me one-on-one. And who doesn't want that? You can become an insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. This episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50+ infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASEmedical.com. Evan, many people, surprisingly, picked the Buccaneers to win on Monday night, including the three of us on this show, because we're big-brained individuals. They know what's going to happen. But
that
nationally,
is what it is.
Yeah, but nationally, the Bucs were getting a lot of love to the point that it was starting to make Bucs fans a little bit nervous. I fully expect that love to end this week, going up against Detroit, but more on that later. The Bucs took care of business and looked like the team we saw during that 4-game win streak where everything was clicking. All 3 phases were playing complementary football. What is your biggest takeaway from that dominant win over the Eagles Monday night?
First, my takeaway is just how impressive this defense has been looking. And it's not just the Eagles game. They've really been stringing together tremendous performances for a little more than a month now. They're still at this point completely healthy. So you're kind of you're seeing Todd Bowles jump into his bag a little bit with some different things he can do. I mean, we saw Kalijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby at one point as like a middle linebacker. There was some really cool wrinkles. And of course, I imagine things will look a little bit differently because of just how they wanted to play the Eagles. Philly never once forced Todd Bowles to adjust his game plan. You know, that's the other thing. I don't know how much. So I think 2 things were at work. I thought the Buccaneers played an awesome game, and I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a trash can. So it's just, schematically, they were a mess. Fundamentally, in their just a mess. They couldn't tackle. I mean, you think the Detroit Lions are going to allow Trey Palmer to break out that run for 50 some odd yards for a touchdown? You think they're going to allow David Moore to score a touchdown on that kind of play? It was not a good brand of football, a team that certainly did not look like a playoff caliber squad. And it looked like one playoff caliber team, took care of a non-playoff looking team pretty easily. And then finally, the offense, despite scoring 32, despite putting up north than 400, they left a lot of meat on the bone. I really thought that they should have had like 500 yards in this game and crossed the 40-point mark. They didn't. They only entered the red zone once. And, they had to settle for 3 field goals. Chase McLaughlin continues to be a fantastic piece to this team. Arguably the best free agent signing that Jason Light made right next to Baker Mayfield. So the win certainly quells a lot of discussion surrounding Todd Bowles' job. He's going to be here next year. It certainly helps the fans maybe digest the fact that Baker Mayfield is going to be here a little bit longer as well. Certainly a great performance from him. Despite rib injuries and ankle injuries, he was a limited participant all week. He didn't look like it. I was really happy to see what he looked like, despite getting, I think, sacked 4 times. It seems like he relatively made it out of that game okay, all things considering. So we'll kind of see what his progress is like entering Detroit. But yeah, I just thought that this was a really good version of the Bucs and just an atrocious version of the Eagles, which we have seen for 6-7 weeks now. And you put great versus bad, and that's the result that you get, just a whooping. And the largest point differential in a playoff game for the Buccaneers since their Super Bowl win against the Raiders.
Yeah, one more point of their margin of victory than Super Bowl 55 against the Kansas City Chiefs. But I will say this as a response to your comment. I don't know if Detroit has any choice in whether or not Trey Palmer scores that kind of touchdown. It really boils down to whether or not Trey Palmer wakes up feeling dangerous on Sunday.
It's really more about him waking pissed off. So that's what we got to see. I mean, Sunday I would check Twitter early in the morning, at least before noon, and we got to see if Trey Palmer wakes up pissed off. And if he does, he's likely going to score a touchdown.
Yeah, if you see the tweet, go ahead, hop on FanDuel, pick Trey Palmer anytime touchdown scorer, and go ahead and rake in that money. Real quick, something that I noticed early on in the game kind of continued to be a theme throughout the game, and I'm curious your thoughts. It seemed like after the Packers debacle and Devin White returned to the team, he was pretty much back in his old role. Against the Eagles Monday night, took fewer than 50% of snaps. It was the KJ Britt show. I mean, was that a matchup thing in your opinion? Was that a schematic thing based off of what they thought Philadelphia was going to do? Or are we getting back, now that KJ Britt is healthy, are we getting back to more of that rotation that Todd Bowles had talked about them using?
I think that was more of a matchup deal. And KJ Britt will still see time regardless. But Todd Bowles mentioned that, KJ Britt is one of their best downhill tacklers on the team. And they kind of needed somebody like that in the contest. Also, I think Todd Bowles mentioned that the Eagles were not running a lot of 12 personnel. And they said 12 personnel leans more to Devin, and some other things that they had leaned more to KJ. So it was just more of kind of what their answers were to certain packages from the Eagles. KJ was in that package, and the Eagles kept running out of certain formations, to which Todd Bowles would respond with Britt in there. So I don't think this game and the way that they utilize Britt and Devin is any indication of what the snaps are going to look like in Detroit. I do believe that there will be specific things that KJ Britt will be asked to do, and dependent on how the game is going and what they see from Detroit will dictate whether KJ Britt has a significant say in it. But even though I don't know if Devin really logged any stats, his blitzing pressure. Yeah, I mean, his blitzing pressure, though, certainly forced some things. A couple of times he was, wide open in a gap, shot right through, and, Jalen had to throw it, and it was, an incomplete pass. So sometimes you don't get to really see a player's impact in the box score. You got, and I got to admit, I have to also check out the tape as well. Something I'm going to do later tonight. Obviously, we're a day behind, so usually Tuesdays are my tape days, and now that's getting shifted over. Or I should say Tuesday morning are my tape days. Now it's getting shifted over to Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So, we also saw 0 of Ryan Neal, and that was partly because Zion McCollum is one of his best cover guys. And he said, if I'm going to be blitzing all day and all night, I need someone on the back end who can play that man to man, and that's Zion's strength. I think the quote that Todd Bowles used in a press conference Tuesday was, "We're letting our elephants be elephants and our giraffes be our giraffes," meaning that whatever you do well, we're going to ask you to do that. And they're going to really just focus in on strengths instead of trying to just force round pegs into square holes.
Yeah, well, and it showed. I'll say that. It showed that they were focusing on, hey, do what you do well, and these are the results that can happen. But the Detroit Lions played in the only close game of Wild Card Weekend. So where are they vulnerable, and how can the Bucs exploit them? That is next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. I'm really excited about the potential future of the Buccaneers, but there's still a lot of questions up in the air. Will Baker Mayfield be back for another year or two as the quarterback? What's going to happen with Antoine Winfield Jr.? And can we imagine a world where Mike Evans isn't wearing pewter and red? I mean, fans in Tampa could be facing the losses of Mike Evans and Steven Stamkos in the same year. And that's enough to make anybody start to twitch just a little bit. Therapy can be different for everyone. And most of us have bigger problems in our lives than our favorite sports teams. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for any reason for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress that you have already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and they are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season, it has been the most exciting way to play DFS. And if you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. This week in the divisional round, I'm going with Cade Otton to have more than 31 receiving yards, Jahmyr Gibbs more than 23.5 receiving yards, Jameson Williams less than 35.5 receiving yards, Baker Mayfield more than 245.5 passing yards, and Rachaad White more than 56.5 rushing yards. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers head to Ford Field this Sunday, while the Tampa Bay Lightning head next door to play the Detroit Lions.
Isn't that crazy?
Tampa can really just put a damper on the city of Detroit on Sunday.
That's a big Lightning Red Wings game, by the way. They're right there in the standings.
Yeah. I heard somebody say it. I can't remember where. It wouldn't surprise me if they move that puck drop back to about 7. Oh, they did. It's officially done now.
Yeah, it's a 7 o'clock puck drop. So kickoff for the Lions and Bucks 3 o'clock. Then everyone can walk on next door and watch the Red Wings play the Lightning at 7.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to reach out to the Red Wings and see if I can get double credentialed. David and I can just go from doing the live show and then right across the street go watch the Lightning. But
are you going to the Lions game?
We're to be determined. But David and I have both put in to see if we can get up there. But if we are there, it's going to be to watch the Buccaneers take on the Lions, another team that they lost to in the regular season by 14 points, just like the Eagles. And look, the Lions and their fans are hyped, and understandably so. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of intensity last week with hosting the playoff game, the Matthew Stafford homecoming. They hadn't won a playoff game in 3 decades, all the stuff that came with it. Eminem was there. Barry Sanders was there. Megatron was there. Everyone was there. I think it's going to be really, really hard for the Lions to replicate that level of emotion and intensity. But there's also the fact that the Lions and the Rams played the only close game in the wild card round, and it really could have gone either way. What weaknesses did you see from the Lions on Sunday that the Bucs might be able to take advantage of if they're going to get this upset?
Let me just add on before I answer that question. Let me add on to this because you bring up a good point. And someone at the stadium asked me yesterday, hey, do the Buccaneers have a chance? And my response was, I am a little bit worried about the spot for the Lions. It sucks that it's a shortened week for the Bucs, so a little bit of that is negated. Though I'm sure the Lions were maybe a little bit more focused on the Eagles. But, halfway through that game, you kind of knew that the Bucs were going to win it. So they probably had a solid, 4 to 6 hour head start on preparing for the Buccaneers. So, look, the city of Detroit just won their first playoff game in 30 plus years, right? Electric atmosphere. Prices are insane. And they were playing a Rams team where there was a lot of revenge factor too, personally. I mean, that was personal for Jared Goff.
Yeah.
I think it was a little personal for Dan Campbell as well. And then on top, because, he's an amazing guy and he's going to back up his dude. I think he felt that for Jared. And then, on top of that, you have these players coming off this amazing high of the win. A lot of players, Sans, Jared Goff, and some other dudes who are really going through the playoffs for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's really tough to bring that energy for a full month and to match up there. So if you want an optimistic spin, you want to try to figure out mental gymnastics of how the Buccaneers have a shot entering this contest, I would say that I would not be surprised if the Lions came out a little flat. Not saying anything else, but we'll get to predictions in a little bit. But that's just I wouldn't be surprised by that. Having said that, as far as weaknesses are concerned, I mean, this Lions team is pretty stacked, but the Rams did move the ball on Detroit all night long in that game. That contest, the only reason that Detroit won was that the Rams went 0 for 3 in the red zone. The Lions went 3 for 3 in the red zone. But, I mean, when you look at a lot of the nitty-gritty stats, the Rams were the better team in that game. And the Rams were a hot squad, too. And, they just, things come down to the smallest of margins. Dan Campbell, is going to be risky. There are, Jared Goff has the propensity to make a mistake here or there. But if you have to find a true weakness for this team, it's the passing defense. It's a little bit what the Buccaneers get knocked on for as well. But their passing defense during the regular season was just as bad as the Buccaneers. So I don't know how Tampa Bay is going to try to establish the run against Detroit. They are a really good run defense, just like the Buccaneers. So this could be a very pass-happy game. And as well as Baker played on Monday night, Baker is going to have to be the one that carries this team offensively on Sunday against the Lions if they have any chance to move on to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, well, it'll be helpful if his receivers hold on to the football.
That would be cool.
You know, I'm just saying, you mentioned they probably should have put up 500 yards. I thought they could have gotten into the 50s. Kate Otten drops a touchdown. Granted, should have been pass interference, 1st and goal on like the 2-yard line. Mike Evans drops a touchdown. I mean, it was rough there for a little bit, and they were able to overcome it. But yeah, going back to your earlier point, that was something that I was thinking about today while I was out working. Is this going to be a spot where experience comes into play? Because outside of Jared Goff, there's not a whole lot of postseason experience on this Lions team, whereas the Buccaneers, a lot of this roster has not only been in this spot, they've been even further. You have Baker Mayfield, who still has probably a sour taste in his mouth from losing to the Chiefs when he was with the Browns back in 2020 on some pretty bad officiating down the stretch that could have cost the Browns a big upset. And of course, the Bucs go on to beat the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. But you have the core leadership of this Buccaneers team that's like, look, we've been here. We know what this takes. They can kind of lead those younger and less postseason experienced guys on the team. Whereas take a look at the Lions, and I'm not saying this is everything, but it's certainly a part of the puzzle and a piece of the pie. They don't have that experience. They don't, they haven't been able to, use their experiences to bring others along. And you go back to that's kind of what Brady and Gronk were able to do for the Bucs back in 2020. They're like, take our experiences, learn from that, and this is how we move on. So I wonder if that's going to be a little bit of a factor in this one. But Evan, once again, you get to bust out the crystal ball. It hasn't been put in its velvet lined case and stashed in the attic quite yet. Let's see if it's still as red hot as it's been over the last couple of weeks. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk for just a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin, and that is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my mom, my dad, my wife, my kids got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medication that they needed. I just got home from a hockey weekend where luckily weather wasn't a huge factor, but I had a couple of friends that ended up getting snowed in and trapped into their hotel. Imagine that kind of helpless feeling as a son, a brother, a father, a husband, anything. The Jace Case Pack is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. And this stuff can happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKED ON to get $20 off your order. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs. James Yarcho, Evan Klosky here with you each and every Wednesday. And it's time for those predictions. It's time to speak these things into existence. I'll say this. Your predictive player of the game was the only one that really showed up. You took Levante David. I took Devin White. And David, since Evan picked a David picked Evans.
Yeah, I love
that. That didn't work very well. But the bold prediction, not so good. Not so good last week on the bold prediction. So hopefully, none of ours worked. David's was the closest. He said they were going to score a touchdown on every first half possession, basically the complete opposite of yours. And they scored on almost every possession, just not the touchdowns. I said Rachaad White was going to go ham. Instead, it was a Cade Otton day. But what's your bold prediction for the divisional round for the Buccaneers?
Yeah, I was gonna. Last week I was a little bit off. I thought it was going to be a dink and doink game. I had the wrong guy. It was a dink and doink game. They used a tight end. They didn't necessarily use Rachaad, and when they did use Rachaad or Chase Edmonds, they dropped the ball. So I think Rachaad had 1 or 2 drops. Chase had a drop. So it was. By the way, in that Demo touchdown, Rachaad is wide open in the flat. So there are still opportunities for the running back. I already know it's going to be there, but I think Baker made the right move throwing it to Demo. Okay. So player of the game, we are going to go with, because I know that David's not going to go back into the well, but I will. Mike Evans. It's time.
Oh, that was mine.
It is absolutely time for Mike Evans. The one memory that I have of that Lions game was sitting in that press box being like, I feel like the Buccaneers are just as good as the Lions, but man, did they not execute. They were flat. They were coming off that bye week. Baker, right after Carolina, because the Panthers game was his worst game. I have to go and look at every game, but I think Detroit might be the second worst game he's had this season. He missed. Things were there. Mike was, I think Trey Palmer was open like twice, wide open deep. They missed him. I think Mike had a deep shot that Baker missed. It was a bad Baker game. Like just
it was. And he owns that. He'll come out and say that was his worst game. So
yeah, it just that. I mean, so to me that signals the plays were there. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Got to execute. And you know what? It's just I don't know if the Lions have the secondary, and I don't know if the Lions are going to play this cover 2 shell that a lot of teams have been doing against Tampa Bay, just to shut down Mike. Dan Campbell doesn't strike me as Aaron Glenn doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to capitulate to safe ways of playing. So I just think that Mike's going to have a couple of opportunities here. And I can see him certainly catch a touchdown. Let's tickle 100 yards. And whether, I don't know what's going to happen around. Usually if Mike's eating, other people aren't. So player of the game, Mike Evans. He is so stinking due. And after that Eagles game, that drop, which ultimately didn't hurt them because Demo scored a couple plays later, I just think in the back of his head, he's going, all right. I gotta get it going.
Yeah, and that was another, as I was working today, I was like, Evans is going to go off. So he was going to be my predictive player of the game.
Beat you to it.
Now I'm going to have to pivot, but that's okay.
We'll give you, if it does happen, we will give you a little asterisk on your pick because, so see, that's a good thing. You get 2 picks really. So
yeah, it'll be like getting a half of a sack, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't the initial guy, but I still got there, and I helped a little bit.
And you were still part of the sack celebration, which is important.
That's right. Yeah, full Mortal Kombat celebration.
Or
all right, so Mike,
for Anthony Nelson.
Can why doesn't the stadium play safety dance? When that's all.
And that leads us to our next thing. Where is Locked On Safety Dance?
Yeah, I'm here for it. All right, Mike Evans bounces back. He's due. He has a big game. What about your bold prediction? What do we got there?
Look, I'm going to say it's a bold prediction because the Bucs are 6.5-point underdogs in this contest. I think the Bucs enter halftime leading. I think they're going to go into the break. They're going to be ahead. So I mentioned all the reasons before. If you didn't hear it, you scrolled past it, bad on you. But I mentioned it. Scroll back. Listen again. I just think it's a flat spot out of the gates for Detroit. I think the Bucs have nothing to lose. They're going to be playing with their hair on fire. They're entering that environment for the first time. The Lions are not. They're heading back into it. There's a little bit of been there, done that with the Lions, and digesting that energy. The Bucs are going to be playing off that energy to start. Halftime, things settle down, energy goes away, and then there's a little bit of an adjustment, which will lead to my prediction. But I think entering halftime, the Bucs will be leading this contest.
That sounds a whole heck of a lot like you're about to pick the Detroit Lions to win, but I guess we're going to find out. Dan Campbell eating kneecaps, biting ankles, all those things. Jared Goff gets his revenge game. You know, this we talked about it on the live episode. Beckett had said it to me over the weekend. I sent it out to all of the insiders that this could be, this could line up where the Buccaneers have a full-blown regular season revenge tour. Already took care of the Eagles. You could take care of the Lions. You might meet with the 49ers and then Texans or Bills. I mean, they're not.
Believe me, they're in the locker room. They've dubbed it to the revenge tour. Antoine said it. Devin said it. Shaquille Barrett said it. So they know that they're trying to. That map has been played out, so they certainly know that. But let me just mention very quickly before my prediction: Jared Goff in 2019 played Bowles' defense. He had 517 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, sacked twice, 80.3 QB rating. Then in 2020, 376 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, no sacks, a nearly 100 QB rating. Now he's with Detroit. Earlier in the season, 353 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, 3 sacks, 107.5 QB rating. He is, by QB rating terms, getting better against Todd Bowles. He has a pretty good history against Todd Bowles, at least in yards. I will say 7.45 touchdown to interception ratio at least gives you reason to believe the Bucs can force 1 or 2 bad plays out of Goff, which Tampa Bay is going to need a turnover, and a big turnover. I'm not talking about like just stealing one in the red zone and forcing your offense to go 80 yards down the field to score. I'm talking about in Detroit's territory, taking the ball away. How did the Green Bay Packers beat Detroit in Detroit? Turnovers. They housed one. They sacked Goff, made him fumble deep in his own zone. They flipped that game so early in the contest that the Lions had to play out of character from behind, and they couldn't play catch up. So that's the formula. It, as cliche as it is, they will not win forcing 0 turnovers like they did against Philly. That's my belief. This is a defense built to turn the ball over. I think they can turn the ball over, but they're going to have to force Detroit to play sloppy football, something I think they've done maybe 2 or 3 times this entire season. So I think it's going to be closer than what people predict. And I wish that I had the stones to pick the Bucs, because I actually do believe the Buccaneers have a legitimate chance to go into Detroit and win. I do not think they're going to get blown out. But as of right now, I am stating that the Detroit Lions will win 27-20.
But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Coming up tomorrow, I'm going to be joined by Matt Derry for another crossover Thursday. That's right. The Bucs keep winning. I keep doing crossover shows. That's how it goes. In the meantime, of course, you can check out everything that Evan is doing on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. You can check out my work at bucksnation.com. Follow everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarko_Bucs, and at eCloskey WTSP. Don't forget to become a Locked On Bucs insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.